Hello there, everybody. This is the Ramble Transmissions Podcast. I am your humble host, Kevin Seconds. How's it going? The date is Friday, February 3rd, 2023. It is 10:24 p.m. here in the big city of Sacramento. I'm bundled up, even though my studio is pretty toasty, but I've got my little window open, so if it's a little noisier than usual, it's because I've got the window cracked. There are two nightclubs directly behind me, and it's because it's Friday night, people are rocking, partying, or whatever, so you can probably hear a little bit of this. Initially, I thought it would be fun. I have a microphone over here, and I thought it would be kind of fun to see what it would sound like if we brought in the mic. But you can't really hear the... Sometimes I'm here at night and it's very, very quiet, but you can hear the chatter and the clinking glasses. Sometimes you can hear the bands that are playing. Not too long ago, I was listening to the Lemonheads. They were in town and they were playing. Jeff Rosenstock was playing over there, and I could hear a little bit of his set. It's pretty cool, but we're not getting that tonight. I don't know what's happening over there, so screw it. I would like to first and foremost explain I am not balding. I realize it kind of looks like I am, right? But what's happening here is, so as I mentioned, I think in the last podcast episode, my girl Danny, she did my hair. She did me. She did the blue-green, whatever the fuck it was called. We did two passes, and the second time around last weekend, I went down and she redid everything and kind of touched it up, and it looks good. I like the way it looks. I'm not much of a fussy styler guy with my hair, obviously. Sometimes I get lucky with the part, sometimes not so much. This is one of those weeks where the part really sucks. I also have very light head hair, so it's kind of a reddish brown, auburn, I think is what they call it. And up here it gets very light, up in the front especially. So that's kind of what's going on. You're seeing my natural color hair, which blends in with the pasty white color of my skin. And why am I explaining this to you? I don't owe you guys an explanation. I'm old. I'm 61. So this is pretty impressive that I still have a head of hair, right? Oh, my God. Oh, here we go. Oh, they turned their car stereo off. Man. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for your kindness, your very nice words, your enthusiasm about these podcast thingies. People have been very, very sweet and very, very supportive, and I can't tell you how much that is, how much that means to me. It really does, and it's helped fuel me when I want to start to lose interest in this stuff, which is just who I am. I'll be very excited about it, and then the minute things aren't going quick enough, I'm like, and I start slowing down, and I start rethinking things out and questioning what's happening with me, and then before you know it, I'm off this thing. This is what happened with the original Ramble Transmissions podcast years back. But you guys have kept me going, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the new subscribers. And once again, if you're seeing this on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet to the Kevin Seconds official YouTube channel, please do that, and follow, like the videos if you can. Just help me kind of generate some heat on this page, because I'm going to really be focusing a lot on putting the videos up on the YouTube page. There will be audio only versions of the podcast on all of the usual streaming platforms that you can find. I'm just about there now. I've been kind of sort of easing into this with these real simplified versions of these episodes, just to kind of get the ball rolling. I'm making terrific headway with the other podcast, which is called Please Unfriend Me Now. It's, as I've said before, it's an interview-based podcast. It will be me discussing, talking with people that I love and like and respect and am inspired by, who I've worked with, collaborated, slept with, fought with. It'll be basically people that I know on a bit more of a personal slash intimate level, and I think it's going to be really good. So far, it's gone perfectly. I shouldn't say perfectly. There have been technical problems, but my fault. I just interviewed my dear friend Jonah Matranga. He was great, of course. We got going, we were rolling, and then I realized I was using a new program to record everything, and I'm trying to avoid Zoom because the Zoom thing just doesn't seem like, I don't know. I don't think I like the quality of it. It's great for interviews and meetings and whatnot, but I think for more of a broadcasting streaming thing, I just don't think it's my jam. So I'm using not Streamlabs, but Stream something or other. Fuck, why am I blanking out? I guess it really doesn't matter. StreamYard. Yes, of course, I'm using StreamYard. And Jonah was kind of my first test run, and it was great. It was great. He was fantastic. We get going. We're into it for about 5 minutes, and then I realized I didn't hit the record button because I wasn't that familiar with the StreamYard app. And like a swell guy that he is and a champ, he talked me down off the ledge and said, "Don't worry about it. We can start all over again, hit record, and boom." So, but just fantastic. I've spoken with so many cool people, and I've got a couple of interviews lined up for this next week. My goal is to try to get between 10 and 12. I think maybe last week I said 10 and 15. I mean, hey, if I can get that many in the can before March, I'm doing something good. And the launching of Please Unfriend Me Now podcast will hopefully be on my birthday, which is March 24th. I think it falls on a Friday, so we'll probably release it Friday morning, and we'll do the premiere. And maybe what I'm hoping I can do is I can maybe I'll do a live stream of it, and I'll hang out with people on the YouTube page, and we can chat and BS and whatnot. I don't know. It's just an idea. I'm trying to do whatever I can to make it fun for myself and for you guys. And but you guys have been great. I appreciate it. And the donations, by the way, the financial donations have been wonderful. People, if you're interested in tipping, all proceeds go right back into all of this. This studio that I'm sitting in is, I pay a monthly fee, monthly rent for it. I occasionally buy new things, new art stuff, brushes and paints, audio gear, microphones. Actually, I'm really good with microphones right now, so I don't need that. But, just upkeep. I just put it right back into it because this is essentially my own little side business at this point, and I want to keep it going. So, but thank you guys for helping me, basically fund this thing. I appreciate it. All forms of donations are great, no matter how small or big. And if you don't do it or you can't do it, that's totally cool. I'm not going to be upset about it. I'm not going to feel like you're being a big jerk or anything like that. So, but thank you for the donations. Okay. Oh, why am I wearing a big poofy coat? Well, first of all, my wife got me this coat for Christmas, and I love it. I don't know. It's not that cold, but because I've got the window open right now, I felt like maybe I'm going to need the coat on. So I put it on, and I realized I don't really need it. I'm not hot yet, but I might be taking this off during the course of our this discussion. But anyway, I'll crack this a little bit. Okay, I wanted to talk about shitty jobs. I've had so many fucking jobs in my life. And at one point years back, I did two things. Well, years and years back, I did this thing where I tried to make a note of all the people that I've slept with. Now, I know that this sounds awful, and I don't want to get canceled for being a sexist, misogynistic pig, because I really feel like I'm not. But, curiosity, I must have been bored, and I just started to type out names, and it was much smaller than I imagined. For some reason over the years, when I've been single, I always sort of feel like I'm a bit of I'm a bit promiscuous. And it turns out that I'm not as promiscuous as I sometimes give myself credit for. So I don't know what the fuck that means, and I'm sure it doesn't have that much to do with anybody listening to this. Maybe a couple of you, but I did this with jobs. I wanted to make a list of all of the jobs I had, and maybe if I can find that, I think it's in my somewhere. It's on a hard drive somewhere. But if I can find that, I will. Maybe I'll post it or something, because it's a lot of jobs, and the first. I mean, I had a lot of jobs when I was a kid. Early on, I had realized that I wanted to work. The minute I knew I could make money doing odd jobs, being a paper boy, I did that for a while. I even would sell Grit newspaper. For those of you who don't know, and I don't know why you would know. Let's see if Grit is Grit magazine. Is it magazine? Grit magazine. Wow, it's an online entity. So yeah, grit.com. Grit was just this weird. It was a newspaper, and you would sometimes in the back of comic books, there would be these little ads for, hey, want to make some money? Sell Grit. And it was really geared for teenagers or young people to make a few extra bucks on their own. And the idea would be you'd reach out to them. They'd send you, I don't know if it was a monthly thing. It wasn't weekly, I don't think. But they would send you a box of Grit magazines, and you just go door to door and sell them to people. You kept a certain amount of the money, and then you put the rest of the money in an envelope and sent it back to Grit. And Grit was just this kind of, as I recall, it was always about farming and stories about vegetables, and it's very wholesome and very, very just very, very bland kind of simple life. I don't remember reading a Grit magazine. Maybe it'd be funny to see an old Grit magazine, actually. I'm sure I could find one on eBay if I wanted to. But anyway, I did that for a little while, and then that kind of got to be old. Just going to somebody's door, knocking, and having people tell you to fuck off. You're just trying to sell a fucking paper and make a couple bucks. But I was always mowing lawns. I was doing odd jobs, helping landscape. Friends of mine would they'd go out and hustle, get something going, and then they'd say, "Hey, you want to help me?" And I'd say, "Sure," and they'd pay me a couple bucks. There we go. Here we go. Ready? I probably should not include music in this because I don't want to get dinged by any kind of copyright bullshit. But anyway, yeah, so I did that. But I was always trying to find ways to make money. And being that I was only, 12, from between 12 and 16, there weren't a lot of options. One option was we lived in an apartment complex called the Greenback Apartments, and this was Greenback Lane is the name of the street that we lived off of in basically a Sacramento suburb called Citrus Heights. It's actually it's a incorporated city of its own. They've got their own mayor and police department and whatnot, city council. But back then it was just a suburb, and we lived there. We lived in these apartments. It's very low income. A lot of people that were on welfare and living off of food stamps and just poor families. A lot of single moms who raised kids. That was our story. A lot of older folks, just people living off of like their, I guess their Social Security or whatever the heck. It was an interesting thing. I maintain that we lived in a lot of these apartment complexes, these low-income apartments, and every one of them had just a multitude of stories. And I've written about these stories. I've never shared much of this. Maybe I'll do that. But I do feel that because of all that took place being a kid, being the son of a single mom who was just really trying to keep the family intact and keep us going, whilst having predatory men trying to get into her pants or getting into our pants. I mean, there was a lot of fucked upness going on back then, and that's a whole other fucking podcast episode. But I was just always looking for ways to feel normal, looking for ways to get joy out of life. School wasn't doing it for me. I'd go to school, but I really wasn't all there. I was barely paying attention. My attendance record sucked, And I knew that it was just if I was lucky, I wanted to get to high school. You know what I mean? Like I figured, well, if I can get into at least 2 years of high school, I can drop out. And I kind of knew I was going to drop out way before I dropped out. And that's a whole other thing. I mean, it wasn't that it was a stupid kid. I excelled at a lot of things, but the things that I didn't have an interest in, I just didn't try. And that was things like, math and sports and whatnot. I just didn't give a fuck. It was just not an interest, which I suppose has hurt me in later years as an adult, but it was what it was. So I was always looking for some fun and joy and whatnot, and there was nothing better than getting paid to do some kind of a little job, do some handiwork for somebody and get paid a little money. When I say little, I mean little. For instance, I worked there was a gas station that was just next door. There was a field next door to our apartment complex. Now, we lived in the Greenback apartments. Next door to our right was, or to our left, was another low-income apartment building that was a little more sketchy. There were a lot of bikers that lived there. We knew of drug deals happening. The cops were always coming. The county sheriff was always going over there. I had friends that lived in that apartment complex, and they liked coming over to our apartment complex. I think ours was just a little more pleasant, a little cleaner, a little less sketchy. We also had, both apartment complexes had its own little swimming pool. We had a cleaner, our swimming pool was always clean. It was blue, when you looked at it. It was well taken care of by the management. Next door, on the other side of the fence, was their pool, and it was always kind of green looking and dingy and trash laden. People would, just throw bottles in it, and it would take a week before anybody would clean it up. There was just a kind of a funky difference between the two apartment complexes. I guess because we thought we were more classy, perhaps, we referred to the other apartment complex as the welfare apartments, which is really fucking ballsy, considering that everybody that lived in any of the complexes were primarily on welfare, including my family. So it was just weird to think about that. We kind of had an uppity attitude, against the folks that lived over in the welfare apartments. But anyway, on the other side of that was a field, and on the other side of that was a gas station. And I want to say, I don't know that it matters, but I want to say it was an off-brand. Was there a gas station called Hancock back then? Hancock Gas? Was that something? Boy, talk about an old guy. Let me see. Let me do a little search. Hancock Gas? Is that a Hancock gas station? Is that right? Holy crap, yeah. I was thinking that I was full of shit. But yeah, Hancock Gas. Very interesting. Okay, so I'm not completely off here. So it was a Hancock gas station, and it was owned by a guy named Hutch. And he was just this old guy. He probably wasn't that old. He was probably younger than I am now. But he was just a bald, kind of grizzly guy, smoked a cigar, wore a leather jacket. Like, he was kind of a tough kind of dude. And he was just kind of, what are you kids doing over here, blah, blah, blah. He realized that the best thing he could do would be to put us to work, because we were always going over there and buying candy. There was a 7-Eleven on the other side of him, so we had to walk into his property to get over to the 7-Eleven, and he was always getting us like, go away. There was a fence around the gas station, and I remember we built these elaborate forts just on the other side of the fence. And at one time we built this beautiful fort. We'd found an old couch, we tipped it on its side, and then we found some wood, and we built up, and it literally had a second story, and then we covered it up, and it was a really fucking cool fort. And but because it was attached to his fence, I remember us being inside of him, and then all of a sudden we heard this big fucking boom, and yelling, and it's Hutch on top of the fucking fort trying to stomp it out, like stomp it, destroy it by his boots, and yelling, "You fucking kids, blah, 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 blah." And we were inside of it. I mean, we could have easily been, like, hurt. And so that was the end of our fort. One of many that we built. We just learned to not build it against Hutch's fort. Anyway, he finally started to hire us to help him close the gas station every night. And there were three of us that he would... first of all, my friend Dennis Turner. I had a crush on his little sister, Tina Turner. Yes, it's true. Dennis had this job where Hutch would pay him $1 every night to come over just before close, bring in the stuff that was like kind of sitting along the islands. Back then, they'd have these oil can dispensers, like oil. I mean, now we have the oils in a little plastic, with the spout. Back then, it was just this big cylindrical. Is that a word? Can that you'd have to take a can opener and just open it and kind of a cardboardy paper feeling, the material that made up these cans. But you'd have to take they'd be stacked on these dispensers, and then if you needed oil, you just pull up when you pulled up, you'd say, "Can I get can you check my oil?" And they'd take it from that. Anyway, that would have to be closed and locked. You'd have to hose down the sidewalk and do all this, take out the trash. He would pay Dennis $1 every night to go do all of this stuff. It would take about an hour. Well, Dennis started to, kind of not be so into it. I remember him saying to me, "Hey, Kevin, do you want to do this every once in a while?" I was like, "Fuck yeah," because I wanted $1. So I'd go over there. Eventually, I took over the job. So I was there fucking 7 nights a week, running over there, doing my thing. He'd give me the $1, and almost immediately I would go right over to the 7-Eleven and buy. I remember for $1 in what year would that have been? Let me look real quick. Let me just go back here. 70, so about 73. Is that right? 72-ish. I was 11. And in 72, $1 could go a long way. I remember you could get a bottle of soda. My soda of choice was Pepsi. You could get a bag of sunflower seeds and or chips, small bag of chips, and you could get some kind of candy bar. Sometimes you could get, instead of the candy bar and the chips, you get like a Hostess cupcake or, a fucking Hostess pie or whatever. But you were set for the night. And that I would look forward to that every day. Every day I knew I'd make $1. So, and I'd be set. People, my kids in the apartment complex looked at me like I was just a pimp, Oh boy. There we go. Sound effects and everything on this particular episode. 22 minutes in. Okay, so that was kind of my first job where somebody actually gave me money every day to do this. The apartment complex manager was this guy named Ken. He was a really nice guy. I remember he had bright red hair. And on Saturday mornings, he'd encourage as many kids as possible to come to him, knock on the door. He'd give us each $0.25 to go out and pick up trash along the fence of the property of our apartments. Sometimes he'd have us go next door and clean. He was kind of a nice guy. He was paying us to go out and clean around the neighborhood, which was pretty progressive back then. And then he'd each hand us a shiny $0.25, and we'd go off and buy a Coke or whatever the fuck. So I was like living kind of large, I'm making money. I liked the feeling of it. I didn't have to share it with anybody if I didn't want. That's a big deal for a fucking 11-year-old kid, right? So that had kickstarted this idea that, like, man, when I turn 16, I just want to fucking work. I just want a job. Screw school. Who needs school? Who needs to graduate? Who needs a diploma? Of course, I don't really mean that, but that was my mindset back then. So the first job, the official job I had, where I was actually hired, I was on the payroll, I punched a time card, and wore a uniform, was a McDonald's. And that would have been I was 16, 1977? Yes, 16. And I've told the story on various podcasts before. I won't go bore you guys with it, but basically when my family moved to Reno, from Sacramento in 1977. We moved there with the idea that we were going to share a house with some friends of ours and share the rent, and then we'd all get jobs, and then we'd eventually, my family would move into our own place. Well, that didn't happen. The people we were supposed to move in with flaked, and so myself and my brother, sister, and mom ended up living out of a car for a number of weeks, wherever we could park the car and be away so that nobody could see us and fuck with us. And we were, for a while, we were parking in this park called Paradise Park, which is kind of right at the border where Sparks and Reno meet on Audi Boulevard in Sparks, Nevada. And we would go in, park in a lot in Paradise, park behind trees so cops or nobody would fuck with us. And we slept in the fucking car, I mean, that's just what you did. It wasn't fun. It was pretty harrowing at times. We really didn't know what the fuck we were doing. But the idea at that point was, let's get jobs, my mom and I, because my mom obviously needed to go to work immediately, and because I was the oldest and 16, I was of age to get a job. She was like, I need your help. You got to work. And I wanted to work. So the goal was to get jobs and get ourselves out of the car and at least get into a weekly motel. And back then, there were weekly, just run-down, fucking roach-ridden motels all over Reno and Sparks. So we didn't take, it wasn't going to cost us much, now, like it would nowadays. If you're staying at a hotel or even a Motel 6, it's going to cost much more. But so that was the goal. So my mom went over. There was a McDonald's right next door to the park, and she went over and got a job immediately. And she said, "Hey, they need workers. You want to go apply?" And I really had never filled out a job application. I wasn't. I was super shy. I didn't have any sense of self. I didn't have any hustle. I was just a kind of a piece of skinny clay, pubescent. Just I was awkward and weird. And so I thought, okay, I guess that's what I'll do. So it took me a while to finally get the fucking courage to go and do that. Go apply for this fucking job. I did it, got the job, and they said, all right, we'll start you out part-time, and it pays $2.35 an hour. The minimum wage, I forget what it was nationally. I think in Nevada it was I forget, but I remember making $2.35 an hour in 1977, 16 years old. And I remember they brought me did all the paperwork. They gave me my uniform. They gave me my little hat back then. Everything was polyester and just gross, weird, shitty colors. And you had to wear both the pants and the shirt. They just were awful. They looked awful. When they got dirty, they just got dingier and dingier, and they smelled weird because if you worked, well, I'm jumping ahead, but when I started, I was essentially just piss boy. My job would be come in, monitor the dining room. So it was essentially just being like a glorified busboy. Empty the trash, go out in the parking lot, clean up trash, do whatever, clean the bathrooms. It was just the grunt work. Everything that was gross and that nobody wanted to do, that's what you did when you started out at McDonald's. And that's what I did. I was a pretty sensitive kid, and so I didn't take criticism very well. And I remember the main store manager, the main, I guess, franchise manager or whatever, was this woman named Jeannie. And she appeared to be very, very sweet, always quick to smile, very encouraging. But there was a side to her, too, that was very, she could be really mean. And I remember her kind of telling me, just you got to learn, you got to pick up on things quick. The sooner you do this, the quicker you jump over to shakes. So the next position, the next job in the, position, I guess, in the McDonald's chain was you manned the shake machine. So all you did was make the shakes. People would do a drive-through. I think was there a drive-through when I first started working there? I want to say that they made the drive-through a couple months into my tenure there at McDonald's. But anyway, you went to Shakes, and then you go to Fry's. You'd go be at the fry station, which sucked. Just there, hot. You'd get salt because you're constantly salting the fries once they pull them out of the fucking fryer. You'd spill them into the fucking little fry bin, whatever the hell it was called. Pour a ton of salt on it. Kind of script. I don't know. I don't even know what the term is anymore. And then you scoop them up in this thing and put them into the paper and whatever and get them ready to go. And that they'd just go like it was just a nonstop, pointless job. There was no end to it at all. And I remember just getting salt in my fingernails and in my eyes and just in every crevice. And it was just salt and oil. My hair was gross. It was just very shitty. And I did that for probably a month or something. And then they would let me start work, kind of going over to the grill area. Back then, now it's different. Now I think they've got like these automatic. Everything is cooked quicker. Pardon me, it's almost like nuked, I think. But back then, they had two grills. You do the buns, you do the meat, and you had two grill people at all times, especially at least during the rushes. And then behind that, there would be a table, and then there'd be the fillet of fish area. So once you got out of the fry thing, you'd go over to the fillet of fish, and that was a big deal because you were getting closer to the grill, which is what I wanted to do. I'd watch the guys that were back there doing their thing, and they were so quick. And these are guys my age. I mean, they're just high school age guys, and they're just killing it. And I'm all like, man, I want to be as quick as he is. And I remember just finally getting on the fillet of fish, and I just wasn't keeping up. I was working during the lunch rush, and I remember Jeannie coming over, and she said, "Can I talk with you for a minute?" And took me back in the back and kind of lectured me and said, "You got to keep up. No, you can't get behind. You got to just keep it up. You're never going to get on the grill if you don't pass the fillet of fish department." And I remember just going, "Fuck. All right, come on, man. Focus, dude. You can do this." So I did, and I remember the first day they needed someone to fill in for one of the guys. They said, "Kevin, we need you on grill." Now, I had been sneaking over when it got quieter, and I remember this guy named Dana Boyd. Dana was cool, and he would show me. He's like, "You do this, and you put you place the fucking burger, the meat down, the little meat patties, and you sear them with your spatula, and you turn them over, and you scrape, just this whole ritual." And I got it down. I was like, all right, I can do this. And when it was slow and not too crazy, I was pretty good. I could do it. I could man the whole thing alone. But finally I got on the grill, and I did good. And it was fine. They kept yanking me off of the grill, though, to have me do just stupid shit. For instance, McDonald's back then, and it might be the same now, but McDonald's had this policy where the minute the buns were considered like they were past their expiration time, which wasn't even a fucking, I don't even know if it was like, it might have just been a matter of like a couple of hours. They would make us take these trays full of like buns, just buns, and throw them into the dumpster. And I mean, just hundreds of them. And for a while, because McDonald's was right next to this park, this Paradise Park I was telling you about, you'd have homeless people that would go out over there and hang out, and they'd come over and they'd raid the dumpster and they'd grab the buns, and that was food. And these buns were perfectly good. They weren't like mildewed. I mean, moldy or bad or anything. They were fine. They just were past the point of McDonald's expected, expiration time or whatever. And I remember back then being really offended by, so I just remember the waste drove me nuts, because meanwhile, if you worked at McDonald's, you didn't get free food. You had to pay a percent, you got half off or something, which is really weird to me, like you're working at McDonald's. It's fucking McDonald's. What is the cost per each hamburger, like back then it was pennies, right? But you'd have to pay half for your food every day. And I just thought you're wasting all this shit. I'll take a fucking I'll make a burger out of I'll eat the older, slightly older, the thing that's been sitting there for like 30 minutes. I don't care. I'm a poor kid. I'm hungry. I'll eat whatever. No, that was not what McDonald's. That was not part of the McDonald's rule. And when they realized, so I would let homeless people slide. If I saw a homeless person get into the dumpster, they'd see me and they'd run away. And I'm like, I don't care, go for it. So I was encouraging them to raid dumpster diving, basically, because I thought it was just such a tremendous waste. Well, they found out I did that, and they called me in and they kind of wrote me up. And then what they started making us do, me and whoever the other people were that would take the buns out to throw them in the dumpster, they told us to, when we threw them away now, to jump into the dumpster and stomp out the buns so they're destroyed, so nobody would ever want to eat them, which is just fucking like insane to me. Like they just were not gonna fucking budge on this. Like, no, destroy the buns, don't give them out to anybody who's hungry, don't you eat them, destroy them, make them no more, and I just couldn't handle it. And that was really, once that happened, I realized that my time at McDonald's was coming to a very quick close. The other thing they would do is they'd always pick me. They'd yank me off the grill. I'd be rocking the grill, and they'd say, "Hey, Kevin, we need your help to unload the fucking truck." Every week, or maybe a couple days a week, this huge semi would pull up in the parking lot, and the sounds of the city. And they would they'd put down the conveyor belt or whatever, and they'd unload the truck, and somebody would be there to receive it and put it in the storeroom. Well, they'd always ask me to do it, and I just was like, fuck, why do I get the shitty? I can't get better at these positions that you want me to get better at when you keep taking me off of it and making me do this stupid backbreaking work. So one day I was just in a bad mood, and I'd had it out with one of the. Keep in mind also that the supervisors, I don't remember exactly what they probably called them, crew chiefs or something like that. They'd have the shit workers, and then they just above that they'd have like their crew chiefs, I think is what they called them, and they were all kids. They were people my age, young women, young guys that would like just get to kind of boss you around a little bit. And most of them were pretty power crazy. Most of them would get a little bit of power, and they'd act like dicks. They weren't trained. They weren't prepared to be polite, be mutually respectful. They didn't know how to train, because we all learned from watching these just god-awful orientation videos. And then they'd set you loose, and you're at the mercy of whoever you were working with, basically. And I remember there was only one girl that was about my age. I think she was a year or two older, named Sue, who was nice. She was the only one that was like patient, and she'd ask you to do stuff. She wouldn't bark. There was another woman. There were two women. There was a woman named Margot, and there was a woman named Joanne, and they were assholes. They were so mean. Margot made me break down and cry, which I'm still embarrassed about it. Nothing against crying. There's nothing wrong with being emotional or being upset so much that you tear up and you start crying. But she had really made me, she just tore me down to, she was really big on making me feel like a complete fucking loser. And keep in mind, this girl was, I said woman, she was a girl. I was 16, so she was probably 18. And she just had learned to be just an asshole of a human being, and she just look at you like you were stupid. And I remember that went on for a while. I'm unloading a truck with my old friend Mike Carrick, who's no longer with us. He took his own life years back, and he and I just had we hung out outside of work. He loved music, I love music, and he and I are unloading the truck, and I just lost my fucking mind. Margot came out there and started shouting, and I said, "You don't talk to me like that. Nobody talks to me like that." And she said, "What are you going to do about it? If you don't, you don't have to work here if you don't like it." She couldn't fire me. She could get in the ear of the actual managers and maybe get me written up or eventually fired, but she didn't have the power to fire me. And I just said, "Fuck you." And we're unloading the trucks, Mike and I just said, "Fuck you, kiss my ass, suck my dick. I didn't say suck my dick. I was just done. And she said, you know, you better get back to work or you're fired. And I said, you can't fire me. Anyway, I ended up having a temper tantrum. I started punching boxes, throwing boxes of chocolate syrup across the room, punching, racks of buns, kicking I was being an asshole. And my friend Mike was just like laughing, and he was loving it. He was just like cheering me on, basically. And Apocalypse Now in theaters. But he just was goading me on, and I was done. I was over, and I went to punch the time card. I was gone, and she said, if you punch out, that's the last time. And I said, yeah, fuck you, I know. And I left, and my poor mom, who was working the counter, said, honey, what's going on? And I was like, fuck it, I'll tell you at home, and I just marched the fuck out of there, and that was it. And I remember for being my very first day, my first actual job, I remember feeling so incredibly liberated, and just I stood up for myself. I acted like an asshole, but I really was being treated like a dickhead, and I just knew that I deserved better. I was a hard worker. I did learn quickly, but in a job like that where you don't have much training and you've just got kids running the show, it just took twice as long for me to really get my groove. And like I said, they decided, or a few people decided that, we'll just put Kevin on it, let him go clean the toilets. They would always give me the shitty jobs, and because when I'm working, I'm just like, all right, whatever you need, just be respectful. Ask me. You don't have to kiss my ass. Just ask me to do something, and I'll do it. And so that was it, man. That was like, for me personally, I got to close this window because we're getting noises now, the helicopter noises. Whoops. Just dropped my sign. So, I left, and I was just so exhilarated and so happy, and I had never quit a job before, and I was like, oh, yeah, shit, do I get paid? What do I do? I got the uniform on still. I had no idea what the fuck I was going to do. And I also knew that my mom needed me. My family needed me to work. So I had known that there was a Wendy's being built across the street, and I said, fuck it, I'll go see if there's anybody over there. Maybe there's managers that are kind of helping open the place up. And sure enough, I went in, and this guy Rick was the manager, and I said, hey, are you hiring? And he's like, well, yeah, we'll do it, come in 2 weeks from now. And I said, okay, I'm working over at McDonald's. He saw that I was in McDonald's uniform, and he said, do you work at McDonald's? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, well, that means you got experience. Come on in, and I'll give you an application. So he quickly let me cut in line, and everybody, they were going to start announcing that they were hiring soon. So nobody was applying, and so he let me do that early on. And he almost on the spot, he gave me the job. He said, well, come on in. We'll start training in a couple weeks. And I took that job on, and it was basically the same thing. It was cooler people I worked with. I was much more useful. I was on the grill like right away, because in training they saw that I could handle the drive-through lunch rush, which was kind of a tough gig. And unlike McDonald's, Wendy's offered food to their employees free. You got to eat for free, which was quite something. My next shitty job would have been just a few months later at a place called Boomtown, which is still there. It's a casino hotel on the outskirts of Reno. So when you're coming in from California, you see signs for Verdi, which is a little community. That's where Boomtown was and still is. And it was just a big deal when I was a kid. Sometimes we drive out to Boomtown if we were feeling really, really like frisky to go eat or whatever. And I had heard through a friend that they were hiring bus help. So I went out there, and I got the job immediately. They were paying same shit, $2.35 an hour. This was another early morning deal, and I didn't have a car. I hadn't really started to. I knew how to drive, but not legally, and I didn't have my own car. So luckily, a friend of ours worked there every morning. She was a waitress, and we had the same shift. So she said, I'll just come and get you every morning, and I'll take you home. And that's what she did. And the job was okay. You get there, and sometimes it'd be light. I think it was still dark outside when I get there, and you'd have to prep. You'd have to wear a little, like a white shirt with a badge and a little vest and black slacks, and just kind of, there wasn't much training. The first couple days you just shadow another bus person, and then it was pretty easy to do. You basically just cleared tables, put them in bus tubs, and when the bus tub, it'd sit in a cart, and then you'd take the whole cart back to the dishwasher, get new tubs, put it out. It's just a regular thing. And keep in mind, this is 1977, so people were still smoking in restaurants, which I hated. Even back then, I hated cigarette smoke. And you'd have to clear plates with like egg yolk and like half-eaten pancakes with cigarettes put out on them. And I remember in the mornings I just would have my stomach would just be in the worst shape. I just couldn't handle just the smell and the seeing it. Sometimes I'd have to not look because it would make me just feel sick to my stomach. But this restaurant was enormous. It was a really fucking big. You know what? I have to stop doing this because I noticed that for the first 2 episodes, the still of the video, I'm doing this basically. Maybe I'll just do this every single time. But yeah, let me do it longer so that it'll get into the algorithm or whatever you call it. Okay. But yeah, it was a big restaurant, very, very big. So they'd need like 5 or 6 bus people to take a whole section of the restaurant, and everybody had their own section. You worked with one waiter or waitress, and the waiters and the waitresses could be a little trying. Most of them were cool. Most of them were older women who total stereotype of Flo with the big hair. A lot of them had southern accents. I don't know why. They were from Reno. But it was just kind of just quick, bustling. There'd be a little quiet moment, and then there'd be a rush of people coming in. You had a lot of tour buses coming in, people from other parts of the West Coast, people from Canada, Vancouver, people coming up from the Bay, probably from LA. I don't know, but it was just a constant sort of just people, and you just did the same fucking thing constantly. We made $2.35 an hour, and then at the end of each shift, we'd get the tips, part of the tips. We'd share the tips with the waiters and waitresses, and you could make some pretty good money. But I remember early on getting my first up close and personal experience with really racist white people. There was a woman who was the waitress that I always got matched with, who I didn't. I couldn't stand working with her. She was just kind of a mealy mouth, petty, gossipy. She'd try to make jokes that weren't funny. She was always making racist jokes and sex jokes, and it became more of a fucking a waste of time than anything else. And I dreaded having to get to work when they'd match me up, and I'd see that I was working with her. I'd just be like, oh my God, and I can't remember her name, Dorothy or Dolores or Donna or something probably. But it was just a fucking bummer to have to work with her, and I just fucking despised it. She started in on this thing at some point saying, somebody's stealing tips. One of you bus boys or bus girls are you're stealing tips. Now, Kevin, I know you're not. I know you're a good guy and you wouldn't do it. I think it's what was his name? Paul. He was a black kid. I remember him being my age, and he and I got along great. He was just a fellow bus boy, and I want to say it's Todd or Paul. Anyway, I'm going to say Paul. So she immediately said, I'm pretty sure it's Paul that's stealing the tips. And I instinctively just said, no, he's a good guy. He's really cool. He likes his job. He works hard. I don't think it's Paul. And she was just convinced. She was convinced. And again, there was probably 5, 6, 7 of us that were working as bus help. So it could have been a number of us. It could have been me. I was a poor kid. I did steal shit. I hadn't stolen anything recently, and I didn't steal tips there because I just didn't. Maybe if I'd worked there longer and I figured out an angle, I would have. But I just didn't think Paul was the one who stole the tips. And so I worked there for a couple months. It was already becoming trying because I had to get up so early just to wait to get a ride out there. And then I'd have to, after I was done, I'd have to wait for like fucking 30 minutes for my friend to get off of her shift so she could come and, pick me up and take me home every day. I was sick of that. I was sick of just the fucking monotony. And now I have this racist asshole woman who is just not going to let up. So, I had already thought about quitting, and one day I get called in to an office before the shift, and they said, we need you to come in. We need to talk to you. So I go in, and there's a couple people with suits on, like manager, boss, pit boss. I don't know what they were. They were managerial. And then Paul is sitting in there, and they said, well, we know that one of you has been stealing tips, and we have every reason to believe that it was you, Paul. We don't think it was you, Kevin. And I just lost my fucking mind. I wasn't even woke or politically correct. I had an insight as to how shitty racism was because my mom talked to us a lot about it, but I knew what prejudice was. I just hadn't experienced it in the workplace at that point. And I just went on this fucking tirade. I was like, Paul's a great guy. I know him. He's a friend. He would never do that. And, if you fire him, you're going to have to fire me. And I got fired. I got fired for speaking my mind and standing up for Paul. Paul ended up not getting fired, did I recall. I remember having to go in there to get my check, and I remember he was still working there. And I said, so they didn't fire you? And he said, no, they gave me a warning. And I was just happy to get the fuck out of there, but I was kind of bummed that I'd stuck up for him, and then he ended up staying. But that would have been the next worst job. Now, we're coming up to an hour, so I want to get this done. It's 52 minutes. The next job I had that was the worst was in 1983. 19 years old, I guess. 7 Seconds has already been a band where we've already played shows, started establishing ourselves as the big punk rock band in Reno. We had already started to go play out of town. It's already in my soul that this is what I want to do. But my working class roots said, don't quit your day job. Keep working because, you don't want to rely on punk rock to make a living. What a dumb thought that is, right? So I got a job at the Harold's Club. Now, Harold's Club's no longer there. Harold's Club for years was like one of the top hotel casinos in Reno. It was very old school, and they had the original location, which was this old high-rise building, and then they had built an extended version of it, which is much more modern. And they were always, all the casinos downtown back then, anybody could get a job. I think as long as you weren't like a felon, and who knows, I'm pretty sure I worked with a few felons, in my time as a casino worker. But they were looking for porter help. Now, being a porter in a casino, at least back then, at Harold's Club, was you walked around. They made you wear this green, we call them monkey suits, just this green smock. No, it was just a jacket, like a dinner jacket with two pockets down here. It was just awful. And you had your little name badge, name pin, and black slacks, and you just walked around with a little mini broom and a dustpan all fucking day for 8 hours. And your job was you'd get assigned a section of a part of the casino, and you just went around all day long sweeping up coin wrappers. Back then, it was before the slot machines would take credit cards or whatever the fuck they do now. You'd just be pumping. You buy these rolls of dimes, pennies, dimes, nickels, quarters, whatever, 50-cent pieces, silver dollars, and you just crack open the paper, put the coins in, and most people would just throw the paper on the floor because, hey, they're reporters. That's what our job was. So I would just literally scoop up fucking coin roll paper all day long. I'd empty out cigarette butts from the ashtrays, and I'd go in and check on the bathrooms and make sure that the garbage wasn't crazy. And that was my job for 8 hours. And at first it was like, okay, because I was on my feet, I figured I'd at least get some exercise. It was so mind-numbingly awful that it killed my brain, and I didn't work there for very long. Keep in mind, I was also just starting to end a relationship with a woman who I thought I was in love with, and she and I just were having trouble. She was experiencing a lot of her own what I later found out was mental illness, and every time I would talk about breaking up, she would just fucking lose her shit, and I was worried. I was worried that she was going to do something drastic. So I was having a tough time breaking up with her, and she wasn't going to break up with me apparently, so that was rough. But the only thing that saved me from that fucking job was daydreaming about 7 Seconds, doing shows and playing and making our first big album. It just was awful, and I was depressed, and I just felt like I wanted out of Reno, but I couldn't afford to move out of Reno. One of the highlights, and this is something that always I think about often, is that they had 2 bars in the part of the casino that I worked at, and they would I guess they were trying to be edgy, and they would show MTV on they have a TV screen, and instead of showing sports like they did at most TVs, they would show they just beam MTV all day. And so that was one of the things that kind of kept me interested. Every once in a while I'd look up at the TV and there'd be one of the few videos of all the hundreds and thousands of videos that were shitty. I'd see 99 Luftballons or whatever from Nina. But they were also, MTV started doing, there was this period where they were showing highlights from the Live at Red Rocks concert, the U2 show concert from Red Rocks in Colorado. And I remember being mesmerized because it was just so beautifully done, and the songs were great. I really had kind of gotten turned on to U2 from my ex-girlfriend Michelle, and I was really, really, really getting into that band. And I remember just watching the live footage and just being like, holy shit, this is amazing. And I would just sit up there and stare with my mouth open, and sometimes somebody would say, hey Kevin, can you get over there in that area and do this? And I'd be like, yes. But they were showing it in rotation, so I'd get to see it every once in a while. But honest to God, that was like one of the few things that kept me from losing my mind at working in this job for the fucking 2 months that I worked there. The final job, I did work at a Sears catalog thing where I was on the phone, I had a headset, and I was on a computer, and I would take orders. That sucked. I didn't do that for very long. But then I got this job as a maid for a motel called Sunrise Motel. I think it's still there. It's in Sparks. And it was just one of those 2-story jobs, like a row of rooms. There was probably maybe at the most 20 rooms. And it was clean. It was nice. I remember I'd get up in the morning. I'd ride my little scooter over there. I had this little scooter. And there were 2 owners. There were 2 owners that ran the place. And they were very, very openly gay. And just 2 men, and very nice. They gave me the job immediately, told me what I was getting paid. I think by then I was making $3 an hour, something like that. This would have been, I was 24, so this would have been 85-ish. So 7 Seconds had been on the road. We'd made a couple records. People were starting to get to know us, but still, my working class roots said, keep a part-time job. And this was a part-time job. I'd go in. My job literally was maids. Oh, by the way, these 2 guys only hired young men. They didn't hire any women. There were no women maids. There were no women. I guess for a hotel, what else would you do? They ran the front desk. So they had all of these young guys my age, and around my age who were working there as maids. And usually there were 2 of us each day, and we'd get 5 to 10 rooms to clean each. And it was just you had a cart with you've seen it, you get the towels and the bedding, and you'd strip them and then make the beds, and they expect you to make the beds a certain way. And I mean, it was a grind. It sucked, but it was kind of nice because if you get to go from room to room, and it wasn't an enclosed hallway. It was like you were facing out. Once you walked out the door, you're outside, so you got to be outside and breathe clean air. And it was just kind of a fun, they'd more or less leave you alone. You could listen to the TV while you clean the bathroom and the toilet and the trash and the beds. And, you'd see some nasty shit, like condoms and cum on the fucking sheets and blood and whatnot. The craziest thing that happened to me was I was there one day working my shift, and I knocked on the door and I said, not room service, maid, whatever. And nobody said anything, so I opened the door, and there was a guy there sitting at the desk, and he goes, "Oh, I thought I locked the door." And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I tried to, announce." And he goes, "That's okay, don't worry about it." I said, "Do you need anything?" And he goes, "Yeah, I need some towel. How about some towels?" So I got some towels, and then he started talking to me about something. And he was an interesting guy, It was kind of, I guess, it kind of, in my mind, it broke up the fucking usual tediousness of just doing the same old thing. But within about 3 or 4 minutes, he started to pay me compliments. Well, you're a good looking guy, I have to give the owners a thumbs up for their help. He was kind of being flirty, I guess. I don't know what the fuck. And I hadn't really had much experience in the way of having men hit on me at this point. So it was like, whatever. I wasn't offended. I wasn't like pissed off. But then he said, "Hey, what time do you get off?" And I was like, "I don't know. Whenever I'm done, it's kind of open." And he goes, "Well, if you want, come back here. I've got some beer. Got some pot. If you're hungry, we can go out and eat." And I was like, "Oh, that's okay. I got a girlfriend." Like instinctively, which I did. I had a girlfriend, but instinctively, I just told him that. And he goes, "Well, I didn't ask you if you had a girlfriend or not." Anyway, he basically offered me $50 if he could give me a blowjob, and I had never really had that happen that was so blatant and so like matter of fact. Like, "Well, I'm prepared to give you $50 if you let me suck your dick." Very crazy, eye-opening. I didn't accept his offer. I considered it. I could use the $50, and I didn't apparently have to do anything. But no, I didn't accept the offer for anybody who might be curious. And those were probably the worst jobs. The hotel job wasn't as bad as the other jobs. It was just a bummer. And cleaning up after people who had just slept, fucked, ate food, had their periods, shit themselves, whatever the fuck it was, just wasn't my cup of tea. And on that note, we're just over an hour. I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much for watching this or listening to it. I hope that somehow you were able to get something from this, something educational maybe. But much love to you all for your support. Once again, if you would like to donate, here is the information right here. I don't expect it, but I accept it and am grateful for anything anybody sends me. Until the next time, we'll talk soon. All right. Be well. Bye.